Hi everyone! Have you heard about Elixir? Elixir, the programming language that is part of the Erlang ecosystem. This webinar is for anyone who hasn't explored Elixir yet, or perhaps know it exists but never has tried it. My name is Carlo. I am a Mexican software developer and part of the Erlang Solutions team. I am also an illustrator and the founder of Visual Partnership, where I combine drawing and software to create unique projects. In the next few minutes, I will give you a tour through the jungle of Elixir. I will show you why you might want to consider learning it, whether on your own, with your team, or within your company. Whether you are an experienced developer or just starting out, learning Elixir will equip you with valuable skills to grow as a professional developer. So I wanted to start with this question. How did you start your journey in software development? Because for me, remembering my story, my journey in software development, I remember that in the very beginning, my idea about what software development is were about writing lines of code. And this idea, of course, was wrong because when I start my first projects, when I start to work in my first job as a programmer, I understood that software development involved more than just writing lines of code. I mean, that involved, of course, programming languages, techniques, but also involved other technical things like unit testing, um, control versions, using tools like Git, GitHub, understand the whole life cycle of a software project, understand what it is, CI and CD, understand the working culture in your own team, understand other tools, techniques, why personal development matters. And I think that, of course, you can start to use um, your tools depending on many factors. I mean, at the very beginning, most of us used to choose our tool set based on probably the time to market, the talent availability, or the educational resources. And for me, I understood that writing code is more like this because there are a lot of complexity to do. So, in these terms, what does Elixir have to offer us? Because probably we can use any programming language to create software projects. And in these terms, why Elixir? Why choose Elixir? So let me share the highlights of this programming language and explain why it's worth it to learning. In the Ericsson Computer Science Laboratory, a group of people create a new programming language, which was Erlang. Erlang was this language to address many problems in telecommunications. Uh, it was designed to handle concurrent tasks, be distributed, control hardware, operate in real time, manage complex systems, and ensure continuous operation for years without interruption. This is important to mention because all of these features are the characteristics of a telecommunication system. Erlang was created as a language for create telecommunication systems. And as many other programming languages, it comes with a virtual machine, which is the beam. Like other virtual machines, is able to run multiple programming languages. One of them is Elixir. Elixir was created by Jose Valim, if like 14 years ago, probably. And Elixir was a very different programming language that inherit all the capabilities of Erlang. So I consider that Elixir is a very friendly language. And I want to share with you the highlights of my story learning Elixir. There are many perspectives about how you can learn Elixir. But let me show you and share my own journey. So at the very beginning, I think that the most important part is realize that you are in other world. I come from object-oriented perspective. So for me, what's really important realize that functional programming it's very different because probably the first questions that you are going to face in Elixir is, okay, how can I write software in Elixir? And the answer is, okay, you can write software using modules and functions. An Elixir module looks like this. Basically, is a collection of functions, and you are going to implement your code logic into these functions. So the module is just the collection of all of these functions that contains your logic. This is a snippet of code, and if you see, it's very similar than Ruby because it's very inspired on this community. So you should design software using functions, and you will keep some logic into functions that are part of a module. This is the way that you create software in Elixir. But remember that we are in functional programming, and we have something really, really special and different than other platforms and other ecosystem, which is the data transformation. And I really love this part because for me, coming from object-oriented was a very different world. And for be very honest, it was more simple to understand that you have functions instead of classes and objects and understand that the approach is the data transformation. What it means, that means that you have an input that is going to be transformed in a function to create an output. So you can pipe many functions to implement different logics there and create an output. This idea, it's very simple because this reminds like a production line, but it's very powerful. Understand that you can organize or all your logic in these terms. For me, it was very simple to understand that I should think in this model. So this is a short example about how Elixir looks like. This is a function for execute some calculations, and we have an special operator, which is this, the pipe operator, that basically takes the output of the function and passes it on as input for the next function. So this is the visualization about what are you doing here? Because at least for this example, it doesn't matter if you don't know what are doing this function, but the good part is that you can start to read the interpretation of this logic. This is another example of how it looks like a complete module in Elixir where you have a main function and you are using other functions to implement your logic. So for me as a beginner, what's really nice understand that the Elixir have these kind of operators to make it easier to read and understand and interpret the code. So at the end of the day, an Elixir application is a collection of modules that contains functions. And that's all. You don't need classes, you don't need objects. In the most basic explanation, it's about functions and modules. Helena Hermans have this great book, which is The Programmer's Brain. And she mentions that coding involves cognitive processes. When we are coding, we are creating these cognitive processes in our brains. And I mention this because for me, coding Elixir, it's very simple. And it's very simple to understand and interpret because it's about just functions that you have to understand how they are organized and how they are invoked. And that's all. And compared with other approaches, for me it was more easy to understand this. And of course, this is part of the functional programming. So at the end of the day, the Elixir ecosystem have the functional paradigm, things like data transformation approach, operators like the pipe operator, but also Elixir provides you of a very complete tool set for you. So you have a very interactive development experience. If you want to write a unit test, Elixir have a good framework for that. Um, Elixir have a tool which is Mix for creative projects. Elixir implement some features for create documentation. And I mention this because I consider that Elixir is focusing on being productive. This is how I felt when I start my journey in Elixir with all of these things, because I was able to implement all the logic enough for create my applications, and compared with my previous experiences in object-oriented, I was able to do the same in Elixir because Elixir provides you with many things, and it's a very complete ecosystem. So for me, I think that a beginner Elixir developer is a very productive Elixir developer. And the good part is that there is more in this. There is more about Elixir that you can learn and master it. And I mention this because the community have really, really great projects. For example, we have the Phoenix framework for create full stack applications. We have projects like Ecto for connect database. We have NERDS for embedded systems. And recently, we have numerical Elixir for create machine learning projects. So as I mentioned before, the code interpretation, it's a very good experience in Elixir. And I think that this is really important, especially for beginners, because it's very friendly the way that you can start your journey in Elixir. And also, I want to mention that being productive is about to be able to put your applications on production environments. The time to market is very impressive in Elixir because, as I mentioned before, Elixir is focusing on productivity. And for me, one important thing is the developer happiness. You can imagine how awesome is working with Elixir, with the toolset, with all the whole experience, because Elixir is focusing on put you in the line to implement your ideas instead of dealing with configuration or other things. You are almost ready to start to implement your code logic using Elixir. And this is very important for me. Understand the developer happiness of your programming language. So for all of these things, I consider that you can become a very productive Elixir developer. In my own journey, this takes some time because understanding the functional paradigm is not easy, needs time, needs practice, needs a lot of exercise, needs a lot of mentoring. So the good part is that it worth it because now Elixir have almost a lot of implementation to create almost any kind of project. I mean, even machine learning projects. And I feel like compared with other programming languages, Elixir becomes a really powerful option if you want to learn it and implement in your day by day. And I think that these reasons are enough to learn Elixir and consider have another programming language in the functional jungle for you. And the good part is that there is still more on this because if you remember at the beginning of this presentation, I mentioned that Erlang is like the father of Elixir because they are sharing the same virtual machine. And Erlang implement a concurrent model, which is the concurrency-oriented programming. Um, and if you remember, I mentioned that Erlang was created for create and implement telecommunication systems. So that means that Elixir inherits all of these capabilities. So talking about concurrency, distribution, fault tolerance, and real-time operations are part of Elixir as well. And how can you implement all of these features? Well, this is thanks to the concurrency-oriented programming. And in Elixir and in the Erlang world, everything is a process. A process is the most basic entity for running something. I mean, if you have a piece of code, this could be executed inside a process. And a process is also a unit of failure. The idea of a process in Elixir is similar than the operative system processes, are very similar. But the difference is that a process in Elixir, it's a very lightweight operation. And you have an internal state, and you can communicate processes to each other using messages. So, in a very general explanation, you can create a process to execute a piece of code. As I mentioned before, that piece of code could be a function. So imagine that you have a function and you need more power to process something. Using Elixir and using this approach, you will be able to implement this kind of designs if you need it. So you can create a process to keep this logic. But if you need more power, it's very easy to say to Elixir, hey, I need to repeat this operation many times. So please create many processes as I need for handle all of this operation. And the good part is that if you need more power, you can create many processes as you need. This is the way that Elixir handles concurrency. But there is so much more in this because if you need more power, remember that Elixir and Erlang are distributed. That means that when you are creating an application, you will have a node where your process are going to live there. But if you need more power than this, then you can connect another node and create a distributed system with this. So I think that this is a very general overview. So I hope that the visuals help to understand this point because it's very important and excited. But with this, I think that you can become more than a productive developer because Elixir provides you a lot of things to implement inside the whole ecosystem. What does Elixir have to offer us? As I mentioned before, you have the function paradigm, the data transformation approach, but also you have all the frameworks and libraries around Elixir to create your own applications. And also, if you want to create massive, concurrent, and distributed applications, you can do this using processes, using the Erlang approach to create your own applications. So I think that all of these reasons are enough for consider learning Elixir. And I mention this because the Elixir ecosystem it's very different compared with others because you have all of these inside the same ecosystem. You don't need to learn other tools or pay for any cloud service for create your massive application. And I think that this is really, really important to realize that you have a lot of tools in the same ecosystem. So now, if you are thinking, how can you start your journey in Elixir? I prepared a GitHub repository with part of the content on this presentation for you. It's you can scan the QR code here, and this is the link to the GitHub repository. And I suggest to you the following ideas. You can create a study group in your company for learning Elixir. If you want, you can create the study group probably maybe with your friends or even alone. I suggest to you use the Elixir School, which is a really great site for beginners. And also, if you want feedback on your code exercise, I suggest to you use Exercesem.io. They have really good tracks and good mentors there. And also, the last one is check the Elixir books at the Pragmatic Bookshelf. They have really, really, really great resources. I complement with other resources in the link. So just for close this webinar, I just wanted to share with you my highlights in my journey using Elixir. I think that it's a very different approach than other programming languages that can give you different skills for your developer's journey. So I made all of these drawings were made by me. I hope that these were helpful to understand the point of this presentation. You can reach me for collaborations in my visual partnership accounts or in my social media, I mean Twitter or LinkedIn. You can find me as Carlo Gilmar. So I hope to see you soon and welcome to the Elixir community. Thank you.